Welcome to another episode on our channel. This is probably the last Civil War soldier that I'll do, but I wanted to do this one because it was kind of an interesting history lesson for me. This person that I'm trying to represent, his name was Francis Edwin Brownell. That's Brown, Brownell, Brownell. He was a private and later accepted a commission to first lieutenant. He was a private, though he started out as a private, in the 11th New York Zouaves Volunteer Regiment. And why is that important? Well, Zouaves played a significant role in the war. They were Americans, but they patterned themselves after French forces who had fought in North Africa, known as Zouaves. They were considered an elite fighting force back then. And a lot of armies tried to replicate their style, their look, and so forth. So they often had bright colors. But they were noted not only for being elite, but brave and aggressive fighting tactics on the field. So this, again, is the 11th New York Zouaves Volunteer Regiment. The Union had 70 regiments of Zouaves, and the Confederacy had a smaller number of units, companies. They had 25 companies, most of them coming from Louisiana. And that kind of makes sense because of that French connection there. So the thing about Zouaves is that they really had bright uniforms. And the red is important here because the men in the 11th New York Zouaves Volunteer Regiment primarily were firefighters. So that's the red shirt, the red hat. There are a few things missing, some lining here in colors of brown and orange on the sides of his jacket. The letter A on the red part of his kepi, which would have represented A Company, and one Z, which would have represented First Zouaves. But they were known as the first fire Zouaves because of their ties to firefighting. And Premier here is the name of their fire company. So this is actually attempting to replicate a person who lived and survived the Civil War and received the first Congressional Medal of Honor. So they were sent by Lincoln to Virginia, they had succeeded, and they were sent to Virginia. They got to Alexandria, Virginia. They were heading to the telegraph office, and on their way there, they passed an inn where the Confederate flag was very visible. In fact, so visible, it could be seen from the White House. And the colonel of the regiment, Colonel Elmer Ellsworth, took it upon himself with Brownell to go and cut down the Confederate flag. The proprietor of that establishment took out his shotgun, came charging at them, got the first shot off. He lunged at the proprietor, and used his bayonet on him. The second shot kind of went over his head, so he wasn't hurt, but the first shot had gotten and killed the commander immediately, Colonel Ellsworth, who is a friend of Lincoln again. So this is part of history. He was the first soldier to receive a Medal of Honor in the Civil War, and his commander was the first casualty of the Civil War. So Yeah. At first glance, I, don't know if it's crystal clear in the image, but this is a gray colored uniform, which is true to the uniform. There's dark blue here and a red shirt, red hat or kepi. So this is true to as true to the uniform as I could possibly get with the time I had free. Now I can add a few things, like I said, to it. I can add an A for A company to the red part of the hat, one Z to represent first Zouave, and then some ribbing around the edges of the jacket to really make this as close as possible to the uniform that was worn by Brownell in the 11th New York Zouaves Volunteer Regiment. So with that, we'll pause and get him on a turn tray so we can see him from different angles. So if you look for Francis Edwin Brownell, you'll probably see a black and white picture of him. And then if you're lucky, you'll find a colorized picture. And what they're representing is a gray uniform. Blue here, brown boots, brown gaiters, red shirt, red kepi. He does have A for A company and one Z for first Zouave. And he does have some ribbing on the edges of his jacket. So hopefully I'll have time to do the finishing touches on him before I show you the entire Civil War set that we kind of created, customized on our own here. But first, I'll probably show you, before we get to Civil War, I'll show you Revolutionary War, then Civil War, and the First World War, and the Second World War. I think that'll be the progression that we'll go through when we show you all the figures in our collection. But here he is with brown boots, again, brown, basically gaiters. Should be leather. I use felt. That's what I had handy. It kind of looks like leather, though. He's got a gray uniform. And this is actually a uniform from Sideshow. It originally was very light blue, and it had a yellow design on the front of the uniform. They did that. They wanted to be very colorful. So yellow was predominant, red was predominant in that uniform too, but light blue was predominant in that uniform. So this took the light blue, made it gray. So we'll just kind of go around and show you what he looked like. Now I took a little liberty here and used a black backpack. To be as accurate as possible, it probably should be brown. But anyway, we'll pause here and get some tighter shots from here on. So I was fortunate enough to find a Zouave uniform in the Sideshow set of Civil War characters. It was a Union soldier. It was light blue. Like I said earlier, it had a yellow design on it. It had a red sash with yellow borders and a red hat. So that's what I started with. I started with the jacket and used fabric paint to try to get it gray, and noticed it wasn't taking the yellow line out, and I didn't have a ton of gray fabric paint to use. So we took a chance. My husband used automotive gray primer on this uniform. It worked wonderfully. It's not awful stiff. It's a little stiff, but not awful stiff. I mean, you can still move them very nicely. Some paints, you can't move the material at all. This turned out great, actually. So he isn't quite perfect. There were some things that are missing. The A for A company, like I said before, on the red part of his hat, 1Z to represent First Zouave on the black part of the cappy hat. And then he has, on the colorized version of the uniform that you can find on the internet, he has a brown line on the outside on each side coming down here, and then a yellow, not a yellow, but an orange line coming down, and then an orange line just above the blue here. Now, this is where it drives me crazy. The colors don't make any sense to me. Maybe it did to them, but if it was me, I'd be putting this kind of blue down the edge here, followed by a red line. And I would have a red line here, so it would all match nicely. That's me. I'm so bad, I know, but that's what I would do. And I would actually change the boots to black and have, black gaiters, leather gaiters instead of brown. But the brown probably was designed to match the brown down here. And if they got the colorizing right, the backpack was brown. So there was some matching going on with the brown. So the orange, I have no idea. I think it should have been red, but who knows? Anyway, let's go around and see him from all angles here. So Brownell has, he does have a sword and saber. He does have his firearm here. So this is as close as I could get him. He does have another, well, he has a bayonet. The sword is a little shorter than this, and the bayonet is about the same size as the sword, which struck me as strange. It was a long bayonet. So I don't know if that was just for picture purposes. I do know he was right next to the Confederate flag that had blood on it, that when his commander was shot. That became quite a famous picture, I guess, back in its day. So anyway, that's a tighter close-up. We'll pause now and get a really good tight close-up of this face. So we'll go side to side here. Now, the next time you see him, he'll have an A on the red part of his kepi and a 1Z on the black part of his kepi to represent First Zouaves. But I don't know if I can bring myself to do brown and orange here and on the end of the sleeve, but we'll see. I forgot to mention this, but I took a white shirt and used red fabric paint to get this red, and the hat, the kepi red. And the felt, I used brown fabric paint to kind of give it a leather-like look. I think I got that look going on there, so I'm quite happy about that. So anyway, here's one last look at Francis Edwin Brownell. And again, the first Medal of Honor recipient in the Civil War, the first casualty of the Civil War being his commander, who he was trying to defend, Colonel Elmer Ellsworth. So, real part of history. I hope you've liked what you've seen. If you have, consider giving us a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel. In the meantime, everyone, please have a great day.